Hi, it's Lori. Welcome back. Welcome if this is your first time. I have been dreaming of and noticing the first signs of spring, even though it got really cold here last night unexpectedly. For a few more days, we'll have a bit of chillier weather, but we're also noticing the grass is greening up and some things are budding that haven't been before. I love spring. To me, it is a time of new beginnings, of new growth, and just of longer days, usually fairly pretty weather, even though I live in the South where it can be hot faster than we really want it to. When I think of spring, I really do think of flowers and plants and herbs and walking and longer days. All of those things are really exciting to me. So I compiled a list of a few books that I have already read and always consider rereading during this time. A couple that I have not read, one in particular that I have wanted to get to for a while, and a few others that I hadn't heard of until I started really researching books about spring and about gardens. So let's get to the list that I have curated for you today. This one. This is a special edition I got because my girls both had a what's called an Usborne book party, and it's books for children, young adults. And this edition, I just could not refuse, and I wanted to support their party. So this is, if you can hopefully see it, Anne of Green Gables. I know the light. There, look how pretty it is, by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is a longtime favorite of mine. Lucy Maud Montgomery is a Canadian author. She published this in 1908, so this is not a current read. It is a classic for young children, young adults. My sister introduced me to Anne of Green Gables, as she did with a lot of books in my lifetime. But in this particular case, there was an adaptation made of this book into series form. I think it was on PBS at that time, and we started watching it together, and I absolutely adored it, which then prompted me to want to read the books, and there are a number of them. The first one is about Anne's journey into Prince Edward Island. She's an orphan, and Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert are looking to adopt a boy, but they end up with Anne. And Anne is pretty feisty. She has red hair. She's very determined, opinionated, joyful most of the time. And Matthew and Marilla are about a little overwhelmed with her when she first arrives, but she charms them in not too subtle of ways, and their journey together as a family begins. Again, I just love this book. This is an illustrated copy. It has little illustrations at the beginning of each chapter. I love these colors. And then I'm sure that's Anne and Marilla. Nope, that's Mrs. Barry. Sorry. So it really goes through the journey of her meeting other people, going to school, making friends. This one is really just speaks so much to spring and the greening up of everything around us. I love this book. This one is heavy. It is just so dense. I think it is the paper that they've used. This is a very sturdy stock of paper, and I really would like to listen or read this again. I could listen and read along with the illustrations. That would be fun. Another one in the same vein is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is a classic as well. It follows a girl whose name is Mary Lennox, and she was born into a family in British India. And this couple really isn't made to be parents, and they really neglect and ignore her. However, she is raised by the servants and creates a relationship with them until one day the cholera epidemic hits their family and their home, and her parents both die from cholera. Mary is sent away to Yorkshire, to the moors, to live with her father's sister, Lilias, only to arrive and discover that Lilias has also died. but her husband, who's kind of a cranky, crotchety old man, does still live there. However, he's not keen on taking care of a young girl. He does, however, allow his servants to take care of her too. And there is a secret garden that's been locked away, walled around it, because his wife died and he loved her very much. And he doesn't want to see the garden anymore or have any memory of it whatsoever. But of course, Mary, being a little contrary and a little headstrong, is determined to get into the garden and to restore it back to its original beauty. This is another copy that I may have gotten from Usborne. It has very tiny print, but lovely scripted chapter titles. No illustrations in this one, but I had no copy of this. And at the time when I found it, I snapped it up. This one was published by Paper Mill Press, and they do publish a number of other classics. Again, a middle grade, I would say, kind of a perfect time. It's middle grade March and spring is coming. And this just reminds me of all of the good things about spring. And I love that time period. The early 1900s is, to me, just a time of enlivenment. And I don't know, it's cozy, very cozy for me. A debut novel that I read several years ago, and I think I still own it. I just couldn't get it. I couldn't get into the right box to find it. And that's Garden Spells by Sarah Addison Allen. I do like this author, and I do remember this book sticking with me for a while after I finished it. This one describes a family, the Waverly family, and their generations of women who have tended this garden, which contains an apple tree. And the apples are supposedly filled with some kind of magical power that impacts people or affects people who eat the apples. We meet Sydney, who has a young girl, and she is leaving a relationship or a marriage that was unsuccessful and returns to this home to be with her family and kind of redefine her life. And each of the women have a very distinct personality, as I remember, and it weaves a magical kind of story about women, about motherhood, about the earth, about kind of, you know, the things that we might bring into relationships. It was delicious, and it stuck with me all these years, so much so that I have read other books by this author, and I intend to read a few more. The Last Garden in England was sent to me or granted to me from NetGalley as an ARC. I didn't get to it in a timely manner, but I did read this, I think, a year or so ago, and I liked this a lot. It is a multiple timeline piece, historical fiction. The modern day timeline features a preservationist named Emma Lovett, who is really dedicated to restoring old neglected gardens, and a family hire her to support their Highbury House garden. They purchased the property. It's an age-old property that has had a house and a garden on it for a long, long time. And the woman who originally created the garden was named Venetia Smith. And Venetia Smith had a flair at that time of her life, way past when Emma is coming into the picture. She created the original garden for this home, and she has her own backstory, which is delightful and fun to read. And she created the structure for this amazing garden that was very famous at the time, because she was famous for creating these masterpieces for English families in their mansions and in their estates. There's also a 1944 timeline where Beth Pedley comes into the picture, and she lives there for a little while with some other people. And you learn about what happened to Highbury House in the 40s, around the time of the World War. So there's three different perspectives that go back and forth throughout this novel. And I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this 4 stars. And for that reason, I have another Julia Kelly book that's coming out that's in my purview that I really might pick up, because I really loved her style. It was a little challenging to go back and forth to 3 timelines. I find 2 timelines is great. 3 can sometimes be a little more confusing, but it depends on the author. And I don't remember having a terribly difficult time with this, but I do remember them, kind of going back and forth and having to kind of mentally adjust to where you were and what was happening. But it was delightful. So those are the ones I've read. Here are a couple that I have my eyes on. I've collected these special editions of Kate Morton's novels. This one in particular is The Forgotten Garden. These were published by Pan Macmillan, and I just love the way that they were created. I think I got these on, not Book Outlet, I don't think. I think it was Thrift Books. Nevertheless, I love this one. And it's it's tiny print as well. And I don't want anything to happen to it. So I may read this in a different format, but I do love Kate Morton. This plot is very complex though. And I started this a few years ago and I didn't finish it. And here's why. It goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So speaking of keeping everything kind of in your head, it was a little challenging, I have to admit. So it goes into the 90s, it goes into the 70s, it goes way back into 1913 London, which I think is where it begins. Yeah, it goes around and around and around. But in this particular piece, Cassandra is grieving the loss of her grandmother, but she finds this book of fairy tales that her grandmother left for her, and it's written by Eliza Makepeace, I think. And she's curious about Eliza, and she's curious about all the things that are kind of showing up around her. And so she learns about the history and of the area that she's living in. She learns about the history of her grandmother. She learns about the history of Eliza and this particular work. It sounds really delicious, and it has great ratings on Goodreads. It has a 4.14 rating, which is really great. A lot of people have read it. I do think one of my goals, maybe not this year, but in the near future, would be to catch up and read all of Kate Morton's. She does have a new one coming out very soon. This one really does seem like a great spring read to me, and I could listen to it and hope that it doesn't get too confusing with all these different perspectives and timelines. The next one I remember seeing in 2017 when it first came out, and I was intrigued by it, but I never picked it up or purchased it, and that's The Garden of Small Beginnings by Abby Waxman. Her character of Lillian is starting out in a pretty rough way. Her husband has died in a car accident. She's left with 2 children that she's parenting on her own. And she's really struggling emotionally with this realization that she's a single mom, a widow, and really just her life just isn't the same, right? And so her boss signs her up for a vegetable gardening class, and she decides she will go ahead and take it, and things change from there. So she shows up at the botanical garden in Los Angeles and brings her kids, and I think she brings her boss too. And she discovers that she loves this concept of gardening and the quirkiness of the gardeners that she meets along the way. And it kind of begins to pull her out of this space that she's been in with her grief and her loss. It sounds really fun. It's contemporary fiction, probably billed as chick lit in the years that was kind of a trendy thing. An interesting thing, she's written a lot of things, Abby Waxman, but an interesting thing that she says on Goodreads about herself is that if you send her your name and address, she'll send you a signed book plate for one of your books by her. I think that's kind of cool. I don't know if I'll pick this up to keep forever, but it is something that I think would be fun to listen to for sure. Published in 2018, this one had me at the title, and that is Sunshine and Sweet Peas in Nightingale Square by Heidi Swain. A 4.22 rating on Goodreads, but this one follows Kate, who is also leaving a divorced husband. There's a theme here, another tragedy, right? And she really is trying to find a place that is different than when she lived before. And she ends up in Nightingale Square. And when she gets there and meets some of her neighbors, she learns that they want to turn this little piece of land within this community into a community garden. And so they task her with designing that. I think there is a love interest here too. So a cozy little romance, probably. And it's called Sparkling and Sweet and Romantic. And it's a girl kind of down on her luck, and she discovers a way of getting out of that space and falls in love with someone. It has a cute cover, I think, and there are a number of these. It's called the Nightingale Square #1 in Goodreads, but you've probably seen this trend. That happens a lot, and then there is never really a #2 or beyond that. But this author has also written a Christmas piece that sounds a little cute as well. So those are a few that I have read and enjoyed and reread here and there, as well as a couple of new ones that might draw me in and be a fun read for the spring. I think what happens to me in the spring is that I love to get lost in something. In the summer, I have a different feeling about that space, and we'll talk about that when the time comes. But in the spring, I really like to be immersed in a story. So tell me what your favorite reads about gardens are, or what you like to read in the spring. If it's not a book about gardens, what is the sort of overarching theme for you in the spring as you come out of the darker days and into the longer, lighter days of spring and then into summer? I would love to hear if you've read any of these as well, if these are favorites of yours. And as always, thank you for joining me. I am thrilled to have you. If you're not already a subscriber, I would invite you to become one just by clicking the subscribe button above. Thank you so much to all of you who have subscribed and have commented. I love going through those comments as well. As always, I hope you enjoy these books and more, and that you have a happy, happy reading time. Bye.